Slap an eyeball across that, man. How cool is Hilborn stack fuel injection? But does it make power? Is it tunable with different stacks? Do you even care when it looks this good? Pull the kids out of the room, man, because this episode is straight up engine porn. I think we can all agree that the stack fuel injection looks amazing, but why do we feel that way? I think it's the connotation of racing, but why? Here comes the history lesson. Let's go back to the 1930s and a SoCal kid named Stuart Hilborn. He starts racing on the dry lakes of Southern California in his hot rods, and then he goes off to the Army Air Corps in World War II, and he's working on aircraft engines, and he discovers this thing, mechanical fuel injection. He comes back from the war, he simplifies it and adapts it, and makes this basic, iconic design of stack fuel injection. He throws it on his streamliner, he goes 150 miles an hour, he ends up on the cover of the 4th issue of Hot Rod magazine in 1948. Next thing you know, he's making the stuff for Indy cars, he's winning Indy like mad, drag racers start to pick it up, and all throughout the 60s and 70s, and to this day, stack fuel injection means power. And so everybody wants to emulate this look. The problem was, way back when, this was all controlled by mechanical stuff. There was a fuel pump, there was a barrel valve, and basically the throttle was on or off. I'm not saying that you can't drive it or road race it, but it was much more difficult to tune, and so people didn't do it. Then came the mid-90s and the advent of aftermarket electronic fuel injection, and that's when guys were able to put injectors into these old school stacks and start to make them more drivable. Now fast forward to now, and Holley Performance owns Hilborn as one of its companies, and their product is this, the EFI-R Big Block Stack Intake Manifold. And because Holley has it, we get to play with it. Now, to play with it, we're gonna be messing around with not just like the looks and the awesomeness, but can we tune it with different stack lengths? Now, this ends up being a little bit different than what we normally do with carburetor intake manifolds that have a plenum in them. The plenum being like the open box where all of the intake runners run into and draw air from. Instead, with stack injection, we're really turning this big block Chevy into 8 individual one-cylinder engines, because this stack is not sharing a plenum with any of the rest of them. So it goes right down into the cylinder and right out through a header tube, and they're only connected back there at the collector. And so the tuning of runner lengths is going to end up being a little bit different than what we see on our normal plenum intake manifold, and that's because of a thing called ram tuning. So this is a level of rocket science and tuning that I can't fully understand because of the engineering behind it, but I know that we can test it, and I can explain it to you in very simple terms. It's all about pressure wave tuning. So you've got air coming down the stack, and when the intake valve pops open right during valve overlap, there's some pressure in the cylinder that makes that pressure wave, and it travels up the tube, and as soon as it escapes the top of the tube, it changes direction and works its way down. And that's what they call ram tuning, is that pressure wave helping pack the cylinder full of fuel and air. And so you can change the length of these stacks to change the way that pressure wave affects the performance of your engine. And I should give you a caveat that that whole tuning thing changes with every engine, every displacement, every camshaft, every design of the tube and cylinder head. It's wildly crazy, but we're going to be able to show you the basics of it on this particular engine with this stuff from Hilborn. So as I mentioned, you can buy this entire EFI-R manifold and everything from Hilborn through Holley, and they sell 3 different lengths of stacks. They've got the full-on long ones, which are totally awesome looking. Then they've got a medium and a short. And in addition to that, we got ourselves a short stack set that we cut in half to run them really short. And so we're going to be able to test all of those. And in addition to that, we're going to look at some old testing and find out if it makes more power than a single Dominator carburetor on a single plane intake manifold. So this is a 477 cubic inch big block Chevy. It's a big bore and a short stroke. It's got about 12 1/4 to 1 compression. The cylinder head is a Dart 365cc inlet runner, CNC ported, and the camshaft is in the neighborhood of 280 at 50, a big solid roller. So this is an 850 horsepower unit. It is no slouch whatsoever. We're gonna roll it in there and start messing around with the different lengths of ram tubes to find out if it really does anything different to the power curve. And in the end, we're not gonna care because we're gonna sit there and admire how radical this thing looks. I think you'll agree. Hey, let's find out if the Steves do before we start making noise from this thing instead of from this thing. So this thing with the carburetor, I think it made 850 horsepower, but it's gonna be the whole shape of the curve that we're gonna be looking at and comparing, because that's the first thing everyone wants to know is when I posted pictures of this, everyone's like, oh, that's gotta make more power than a carburetor. And I said, why? And they're like, oh, airflow. But that's not the whole story.
The engine's only gonna use as much air as the engine uses, and if an 1150 CFM carburetor does that as adequately as these do, then I don't see it being an airflow issue. I see it being one of these issues with the stack length and height.
One other aspect you can't neglect is each runner services one cylinder. So all 8 cylinders don't see all 8 of those stacks. They only see one stack.
What we've got here is 8 one-cylinder engines tied together with a crankshaft.
And with a collector out here.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I say fire it up. Let's see what our baseline is with the shortest stacks.
Let's see what we do.
Okay, it looks like we made 821.9 horsepower and 647.5 pound-feet of torque. But I want to get right into it. I want to see the test with the carburetor that we did in a prior episode. And there we go. In this setup anyway, it does not make more power than the carburetor. With the carburetor, we saw 852 horsepower. Everything above 6,900 RPM is worse with this particular stack setup. Right here, the red lines show that with the carburetor, we could only start the pull at 4,500 RPM and the EFI will go all the way down. But we keep talking about, the carburetor, but it's not the carburetor that's making the difference really, it's the manifold. So let me grab that for a second, hold on. This is the intake manifold that we ran in that prior test with a carburetor. It is an Edelbrock 2927, a big old single plane. And let's look at the difference in runner length here. I went out and measured the stack all the way to the surface where the manifold bolts to the head. It's pretty much a foot long out there. But look over here. We have one runner at about 8 inches, and then all of the inner runners, all 4 inners are 6 inches. So they're half as long. They're 7 inches versus 12 inches if you look at the average.
That's a huge difference in runner.
Huge difference.
It's the difference between a foot and half a foot.
Here's the question. Knowing that the tendency is that a long runner tends to favor lower RPM and a short runner tends to favor higher RPM, the question is, why doesn't that big long runner improve the torque curve?
Here's part of the problem I see, is this could have headed this direction. And that's what we can't see because it wouldn't carburate down there. I believe that this stack would make more torque down in the 3,500 RPM range, significantly more torque.
Okay.
We're into an area here that gets pretty technical. I've seen runners in stacks this long make more torque at 2,000 RPM. And when you get a certain stack length, it may favor, a short stack may favor 2,000 RPM as well as favor 8,000 RPM.
Okay, that addresses what I was about to ask you, which was if you believe that down here the carburetor was going to make a whole lot less torque than the stack, then I was going to say, so you're saying that the stack made much more power at 3,500 and then fell down way up here at 7,000? And that is what you're saying, because the resonance can happen in different places.
It will cycle through.
You'll have like first order, second order,
Yes,
third order, depending
exactly.
on how broad of an RPM
Exactly.
range you're running.
Then my question is, which we can't answer without all of that super mega science, did it actually make less power because of less airflow or because of the runner length?
I know how to find out.
How?
We have a saw.
So we can
have
cut these
stacks,
shorter.
and we have extra stacks.
Okay. So we're gonna go cut these stacks even shorter to find out if we can have an effect on the top end power.
This seems a lot more like mechanic stuff than engineering stuff, so I'm all for it.
Yeah. All right, let's go cut some stacks. Now we're gonna find out the power of hacking. Here's where we started, here's where we ended. This tube has an effective length of 5.5 inches. This one is 2.5 inches. So will the shorter tube give us back some of that horsepower that we lost at the top end with the longer tube? If I can actually install this, we will find out. And I did. Okay. Is it just us, or can you actually hear this thing come on and off power throughout the sweep?
Yes.
I mean, think so.
Yeah.
That's,
Well, when it becomes more efficient and less efficient, when it's struggling to accelerate, when it's making more power and less power.
yeah. Let's look at the curve. I think it made a little bit more horsepower than the stacks before we cut them.
5, and then it's all free.
Oh, there's sort of that warble we were talking about. It's
Yeah.
not a perfectly smooth curve. Our new power numbers with the half stacks, I guess we'll call them, are 837.2 horsepower and 638.9 pound-feet of torque. But as usual, to learn something, we've got to compare it to our before with the short stack.
Oh,
Wow! The half stack is in black. The short stack is in red. Look at that.
That's what we were talking about, is it just reverses. Where there was a dip, now there'll be a hump. Where there was a dip, now there's a hump. I mean, it's just in a completely different point of VE. That's what I was saying when we started this gets really crazy. There's so many possibilities here because you've got 8 stacks, and nobody said we have to have 8 of any one length. We can start swapping lengths. We can go to header pipes, collectors, and then just change the camshaft 5 degrees on the intake,
And then
the
it all
whole
changes.
thing changes.
Yeah. But
interesting.
I'm not sure I've ever seen an A/B test like this
No.
before.
No.
Where it swaps here and here and here, and then is just a direct improvement there.
Here's what really happens, is within the packaging constraints that we typically have of a tunnel ram or a single 4-barrel intake, we have packaging constraints. So very, very likely the intake manifolds are somewhat similar in runner length. And if you've got a single plane, they're gonna be pretty close. We've changed this thing 2 inches. How
Radically,
do you do
yeah.
that or change it 4 inches in a regular packaged 4-barrel intake manifold? You can't. So we'll see curves that are a little better or worse, but very similar. Here we can change it almost indefinitely.
We're making big changes.
Yeah.
Now, if we looked at the averages,
Why don't we look at the averages?
Yeah, we can.
Why don't we put the other 4 stacks that we have extra that aren't cut and see if we can put something right in the middle of here?
So you want to use half
Half of these.
half stacks, half short stacks.
Yes. And we can look at all 3 averages. We can look at one side, the other side, and the middle.
What cylinders are we going to put the uncut stacks on?
I think I'd like to go ahead and do it in somewhat of a traditional way, is put the long stack on the short inlet runner.
Okay, let's start off with the Brule way, the uncut stack on the shorter intake ports.
Yes.
Yep, here we go.
Okay. I'm actually removing the shortest stacks out of 4 cylinders, which are considered to be the short ports on a big block Chevy. And that's cylinders number 3 and 7 and 2 and 6. We're going to install the original runners that we had, or the original stacks that we had, and see if we can balance this where we can kind of split the 2 curves and have a better overall average.
idea.
I'm going to withhold judgment until I see numbers.
Yeah, I've checked out on the rest of the episode. I have no idea what I'm doing. This is too much science. I guess what we are trying to figure out, though, is whether the short stack, taller stack mix sort of evened out those dips and split the difference. And right now, our peak horsepower number with the mixed stacks, our torque was 636.5 at 6,400 RPM, and we saw the horsepower peak at 7,300 RPM. That was 827.8 horsepower. It does not have the peaks and valleys as much.
Well, let's see if it ends up in the middle.
Yeah, that's what we need to see.
Kind of does.
Kind of does. Black here is the half short, half longer. Red is the out-of-the-box short stack. Blue is the ones that we cut in half. So you can see that that black line almost exactly splits the difference between the peaks and valleys when we run half the stacks short and half of them long.
But the question is why wouldn't it?
Yeah, no, it should.
Yeah.
No, it did what it should do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just think it's interesting to show everything that you can do with all of these links.
Yeah.
It's almost endless.
So our next step is going to be to go to what Hilborn calls the medium length stack,
Sure.
right? Which is taller than any of these.
It is taller than any of these, and you want to just do 8 straights?
Sure.
Yeah.
Why not?
Right, why not? And then we'll put the longs on, and then maybe we can do longs and shorts. And ooh, wouldn't that be weird? The shortest ones and the longest ones?
Never know. Maybe we
knows?
could have
Yeah.
all of this and a little of that.
Maybe. All right, we're going to go to the medium stacks. I need results. Before we even look at that, I will tell you that this is why when I'm talking about stuff, I usually use the word tend. I will often say a longer runner tends to do this because we've learned there is no always. Peak numbers coming up for the mid-length stacks. We made 651.7 pound-feet of torque and 828.4 horsepower, which is at 7,500 RPM. Strangely enough, the highest RPM at peak horsepower that we've seen so far. All right, the red lines are the out-of-the-box short stacks, not the ones that we cut. The black line is the out-of-the-box mid-length. And I really expected to see a big jump up in the torque curve with the longer stacks, with the mid-lengths. And it just didn't do that. It did the DNA again.
I'm saying it's going to do this the whole way up and down.
And yet it virtually matches it above 6,300 RPM.
Frankly, my friend, the engine doesn't give a damn.
Right, that's exactly it. Yeah, so the difference is 5 1/4 inches on the short ones out of the box and about 7 1/4 on the mid-length out of the box.
Yeah.
And it's not doing what I would have expected if this was a plenumed intake manifold, because that's basically would be the comparison of a single 4-barrel versus a tunnel ram.
Yeah.
Kind of the difference in runner length.
Runner length.
Our next step is going to be swapping over to the longest out-of-the-box Hilborn stacks.
There might be a reason Dick Landy ran long stacks.
I have no idea.
We're going to find out.
I've got nothing for this.
Whoa!
And the horsepower comes up from the mid-length stacks to 832.1. Crazy town. Okay.
I'm not 100% sure, but that thing that you say about tends to,
Tends to.
this long stack, I think tends to make more low-end power.
Let's see.
No, look.
Black is the really long stack and red is the mid-length. And once again, it's a DNA strand.
Well, yeah, but I guess you're right, Steve-O. If you look at the average
Way
from
down.
35 to
45 or 5.
yeah, it's definitely better almost throughout that whole range. Although,
Below 5,000, the long stack tends to make more torque.
but we don't know. Maybe the short stack swaps it around. We really have to look at all of them before we can make that call.
It's just weird.
I'm curious to see all the ones that are equal length. So the short one and then the half length. So we have 4 graphs.
So I would say pull up first the out-of-the-box short one, like how Hilborn sells them. Okay. And now we're going to go to the ones that we cut in half. So these will be the shortest ones that we tested. So now the shortest ones are in green, mid-length in blue, the out-of-the-box short ones in red, and the longest ones in black.
So really low-end torque goes by pipe length under 5,000 RPM, pretty much on average.
I think you're right. I really expected, looking at the initial short length, I thought cutting it in half was going to be the ticket. Well, gee, we picked up maybe 8 or something up at the very top in the last 300 RPM. That thing's really kind of poochy all the rest of the way down compared to some of the factory lengths that Holly supplied.
Yeah, way down here. You're saying when it was too short,
from 6,500 down.
It's got the lowest average power, even though it's got the highest peak.
Yeah.
Let me ask you guys this. Look how these are all pretty much the same above 6,300 RPM. Is it possible that is an airflow problem because this has the smallest throttle bores that they sell?
It's certainly possible. I mean, we're starting to tend to see some of the same crossover, a little bit up here, some changes, but I think it's potentially an airflow problem.
Staring at that power curve, the green line being our cut down really short runners and our mid and full length, one of the longest ones, man, really, there is a quite large torque improvement with longer runners. There's almost nowhere that that they're not better in torque.
Well,
they
below
convert
5,000 RPM.
They converge there, but then look,
here it's much worse. Here the mid-length is better. But if you're looking under 5,000,
But you know what? The longest one, it's got power here. It loses a little here, but then it's got lots of power there.
I would be willing to bet that our combination of shorty and regular has a better average than these. Yeah, the one test we haven't been looking at on this graph is when we combined the super short ones with the out-of-the-box short ones. So our colors changed on our graph here. Now what we're looking at is the shortest stack that we cut in half is in pink. The next step up, out-of-the-box short, is in red. The mid-length is in blue. The longest is in black, and the one where we combined the two is in green. And so you can see
it's still down there.
It's pulling right down the middle, but it is still way below the long stack as far as torque goes.
Yeah, a lot.
Well, do we get to gamble once again? Anybody take a guess by looking at the graph?
Oh, yeah.
And then we can put a quarter up. And,
which one's the best?
Yeah, I'm going to say the black one.
The black
one.
Yeah, the black one. I don't think there's a gamble there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what would be the next up runner would be the blue. It would be.
I'm thinking so, the mid-length.
So let's look at the average between long and mid-length.
Let's do that.
Because I think what we learned here is that the shorter that we got, the more power we saw way up at the peak, although that might be limited by our throttle valve size. But the shorter runners actually damaged the power everywhere below 5,000 RPM. And so overall, our tendency is to prefer the mid-length or the longest tube, and we're about to find out which one of those is better. Here's what we're looking at. Our best with the very longest tube is in black, and our worst in red. What do you think, Steve?
I think I like the long ones. They look better, too.
Oh, they look way better. Yeah, these are the coolest ones. That's really the point on the whole episode is the longest ones are definitely the coolest ones.
At least these stick through the hoods. The other one you could hide underneath.
So here's the thing out of all of this is my whole conversation about long tubes tend to do this and short tubes tend to do that.
Okay.
It's correct. We just couldn't see it through all the gobbledygook of all the bumps in the curve. But the mind blower is that because it made so much torque with the long tube, it also brought the horsepower up enough in this range that it killed the short stack on overall average power. If you were going to run a drag car, though, you still might not want to do that.
You wonder how critical that part is if you've got a 6,000 RPM converter and something that revs to 7,500. You know, it's almost a flip of a coin. Neither one seems to matter a whole bunch.
Or a boat that's only up there, or an off-road truck that's only up there, or a road race car that goes back and forth from 5 to 7.
And you know, all of this testing, it's not just what's the power. Some of this is packaging too. You know that Cobra kit car guy does not want that through his hood.
What's wrong with them?
His name isn't David Freiburger.
Oh.
So he's got the little short bells on it, and he probably even has some screens in there or something that knock about 30% of the flow out. But
Yeah.
he's happy as can be because it's all the power he needs on a 2,000-pound car.
But to conclude all of our testing, what did we learn here? I know for me, I'm gonna say it's that tuning of IR manifolds, individual runner manifolds, ends up being radically different than I expected versus a plenumed intake manifold.
Yeah, what was interesting to me is at the end, it kind of did what we expected. The long ones made more torque, but it did not look the way I expected at all. So that's what super threw me off. It totally looked different.
Yeah, the DNA dyno comparison was nothing like I've seen before. How about you? Did you learn anything?
The shock wore off because I saw this a couple days ago when I was pre-testing. Because I looked at it and I went, holy cow. And I'd make little changes and it would do this crazy stuff. And then I'm back on the phone again talking to some people smarter than me saying, what is going on? How is this working? And they helped kind of walk me through it. The other thing I know is I have to buy a car with no hood so I can put those on it.
Because that is the ultimate answer, is that everybody says, who cares what power it makes, look at it. I mean, that's awesome.
It is
and
awesome.
As you know, it is better to look good than to feel good.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And also, I think it's just more questions than answers, which is what happens virtually every time on Engine Masters.
Of course.
Just so you know, every episode has at least 15 minutes cut out, which is Steve being absolutely confounded by the mouse. It's like kryptonite to Brule.
Well, here, let's see if it rolls any better for you. Gee, I guess Superman's not quite so super.
Get that technology away from me, Freiburger.
That's right.
Not just me.
That was funny, though.
The sky, feet on the ground, but I'm ready to fly. Shadows can't hold me, I'm breaking free. This is the rhythm of who I'm meant to be. Feel the pulse, let it take control. Heartbeats racing, it's a thought.